Since we just finished the section on inflammation phase of tissue healing, I want to work through this diagram with you and help you understand what's going on with the inflammation phase a little bit more and what part do we play with that. And so what we're looking at is this project called the pain-spasm-pain cycle. It's kind of a cool diagram that's going to help you see where we play our part in especially the inflammation phase of tissue healing. So it's going to be this cycle. That's why it's called a cycle. I'm going to draw out this cycle for you right now, the parts of it, and then I'm going to explain each part to you. So think about an injury. Maybe it's that picture of the foot that I showed you, or maybe it's something that you've had recently, a sprained ankle, or it could be about anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to start right here. So the very first thing that happens is you get injured, all right? And one of our body's protective systems initially gives us the sensation of pain. And we get that initial pain from a couple of different things. We get it from damage to the cells, right? So that, you have something that gets injured. If you get something that's damaged, it's going to cause pain. But the other thing that's going to cause pain to us is a type of nerve cell that's called a nociceptor. And a nociceptor is set off with that initial injury. It feels pain. It takes that sensation through your afferent nerves to your cervical spine up to your brain, where there it's telling your brain, I hurt. So that's our initial injury. And when that happens, chemical mediators are activated, and they start this whole process, like I said earlier, in starting inflammation. And so our body will then immediately go into this inflammation phase, and we know that it does that in a couple of ways. It's going to do our acute and subacute inflammation mechanisms. And we know they're in that phase by looking at the cardinal signs and symptoms. Remember, that was S, H, A, R, and P. So swelling, heat, altered function, redness, and pain. And so this pain right here is more pain than what we saw from the initial injury. And it's going to carry over to that. So if we have swelling is going to put pressure on our cells, causing our nerve cells, causing even more pain to occur. But we'll also see more chemical mediators releasing pain. What's the word I want? It's going to tell us we're in pain. And some of those chemical mediators that do that, I'm going to give you a few right now, just so that you can kind of get an idea. Bradykinins are released during inflammation. Bradykinins are chemicals that tell our body, that make your body feel pain. Prostaglandins, substance P and prostaglandins are a couple more. I'll just put down substance P here. So these are all released during inflammation that are increasing that pain, just with your injury. And so when our body feels that pain, what happens is it wants to contain it. And it's containing it. We already know that from over here with our subacute and acute mechanisms. But it's also going to do that by going into a spasm. So this occurs both on a cellular level. So you're going to have a cell, sorry, I can't do two things at once. A cell that spasms, but it'll also be on a tissue level as well, where the tissues will actually spasm. So if it's a ligament sprain, your cellular ligament tissue, your cellular tissue that makes up your ligaments, they will go into this spasm. That means that they're contracting. When they're contracting, that means they're tightening up. Think about when you contract your muscle, you tighten it up. So if this is a example of a ligament sprain, those cells that make up the ligament go into a contracted state. And the tissue itself, because of all the cells that are contracting, will go into this spasm. So it doesn't have to be a muscle. It can be the cells themselves of any type of tissue that are going to do that. When anything goes into a spasm, it requires energy to maintain that spasm. That energy comes in the form of oxygen and nutrients. And where do you suppose we get oxygen and nutrients to our tissues? We get it comes from our vessels, from our vascular supply. But what is injured when you have tissue injury? The vascular supply. We want more oxygen. We want more nutrients to maintain this cellular and tissue spasm, because that spasm is protecting us from having more injury. However, in order to maintain that spasm, we need to have a surplus of O2 and nutrients. Unfortunately, we're having less than normal blood flow, so we'll have less than normal oxygen and nutrients getting to that area. And if you have less than normal oxygen getting to those cells, what's going to happen is cells die if they don't have O2. That cell death is actually going to create more garbage to the area. If we have more garbage, we're going to see more swelling. More swelling is going to increase more pain, because now we're going to have even more pressure exerted on the nociceptors. Those nociceptors are going to perpetuate the signs and symptoms, especially swelling. And with swelling, we're going to see altered function for sure. Definitely more pain. And that more pain, again, is going to create even more pain, which is going to really cause this cell death to increase to a point where if it's not controlled, you're going to have an injury that's going to last a very long time. So saying all of that, what can we do for it? Well, we need to allow inflammation to occur, because without inflammation, you're not going to have tissue healing. It's the first phase of tissue healing. But what we can do is we can help control it to some degree. There's a couple of ways that we can control swelling. One of the very first things that we do often when someone has quite an injury is we put ice on it. What does ice do for us? Ice decreases cell metabolism. That decrease in metabolism means we need less O2 to live. And so you're going to have less cell death just by putting ice on it. Often we'll elevate and put on a compression wrap. And what does that do? That's going to limit release of, I'm going to say garbage to area. And we just learned that if we limit that, then we're going to have less pressure on our nociceptors. So we're going to have less pain. Less pain means we're going to have less signs and symptoms, which means you're going to have less swelling, which means you're going to have less of a spasm, which means we're going to have less of a cell death, less pain, and healing begins. Now, there's one thing that I want you to be aware of now. And quite often when we get injured, one of the first things we do is we take something like an Advil. And I want you to know that that's not a good thing to do, because if you know what an Advil is, it's considered an NSAID. And an NSAID stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. What we want is inflammation to begin, but we want to control that. So something better than Advil would be a Tylenol, which is a different type of, I can't spell when I'm doing a Tylenol, is a different type of med. It's called an acetaminophen, which is not an anti-inflammatory, it's an anti-pain. It's also an antipyretic, but in this case, we're using it for pain. And so it will allow the inflammation phase to continue, but start to lessen that pain. And so a general rule of thumb is to have your patient or yourself, I mean, I don't think many of us have the license to administer drugs, even over the counter. But a good rule of thumb is to take Tylenol or some sort of acetaminophen for 24 to 48 hours. Maybe the first 1 to 3 days you'd take Tylenol. And then after that, if the signs and symptoms of inflammation are starting to lessen, and we know that some of it's starting into proliferation, then it would be okay to move over to that Advil, which is a little bit different in what it can do. So there's just a quick talk on the pain, spasm, pain cycle, what we do, why we do it, and how we want to control the inflammation phase, but still allow it to occur. I hope this helps you out.